All right. Looks like we're live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Jared Oliver. Oh, that's kind of weird. It's a little better. All right, let's try that again. We're live. I got a webcam this time. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jared Oliver, your host of the terrible JavaScript game development. Kind of streaming a little out of band today. It's a Saturday. Just kind of laid back today. Not going to do anything too serious today. Normally stream Mondays and Tuesdays, like the full day. So, usually like kind of like a 6+ hour stream. So today probably just streaming an hour or two. And probably not diving into anything too crazy, just cleaning up a few things. But I figured, hey, test out the webcam, the new webcam, and see if we can fix up a few things before we really dive. A few simpler things that we can kind of sweep from under the rug. We don't have to deal with on Monday or Tuesday. So we last left off at a pretty good point, I think. We got our marathon mode. I'll refresh here. So we've got our new marathon game mode, where now as you play, the next new bubbles appear as we pop other bubbles, right? So that kind of adds a little more continuous play compared to the other round-based mode that we had been doing in the past. So this is all, I'm liking the way it is so far. It feels good to play. Still kind of need to figure out, like for example, I'm kind of just playing idle right now. So it'd be nice to have some sort of timer that you have to kind of keep up with more or less. But I'm thinking today we could probably do, in just an hour or two, however long I end up streaming. We can probably, well, for one, I'd like to clean up the ending of the level, because right now there's some crashes, and I'll play towards the end right here. Man. Let's see what we got. Whoops. All right. Any day now, we'll get to the end of the level here. I think I got 50 bubbles turned on right now, so we got to pop 50 before we can, to end the, okay, there we go. Yeah, so that's part of the problem here. Now we got 2 bubbles left, but we're getting errors in the console about color and stuff. And that's because our marathon game object is trying to pass, well, just without digging into it too deeply right off the top of my head here. The marathon's probably trying to reference bubbles that are so that all the bubbles for the level are all get generated and they're put in an array. And then as you pop, like, for however many bubbles we keep in our little target or our little navigation progress meter thing here, the marathon object is trying to say, okay, I need to get the next 3 colors, because it knows that this thing needs 3 colors, so it sends it the next 3 colors. So once we pop this bubble, it's trying to send the next colors here and another one that doesn't exist in our full bubbles array in the marathon object. So that's a problem. And obviously we're getting, some errors in the console here. So I'd like to clean that up and also fix this to just kind of, these bubbles could just disappear. So like as I pop green, purple should slide up here, be the big one, and then blue should be there. And then there just shouldn't be a third bubble at this point because we've reached our, our last 3 bubbles in this case. So I've kind of had it in this state for a while, but I really should just try to fix it today because it shouldn't be too difficult. I'm thinking of one more thing. If this doesn't end up taking me some ridiculous amount of time, like I go on some crazy bug hunt, I will would like to have a little indicator on these bubbles here for when it's a new checkpoint. So if you remember, we've got kind of our checkpoint system, which I changed right at the end of the last stream to 4. So once you pop 4 bubbles, you go to the next checkpoint. So what that means is if you screw up, you don't go. If you screw up, the bubbles from your previous checkpoint. Do I have this thing here? Yes. Whoops. All right. We're getting there. Okay. So if you mess up, if you hit the wrong bubble or crash into the wall, if you pop the wrong bubble, I should say, you have to go back to, the bubbles will reappear from that checkpoint, from the checkpoint that you're on, and then you have to start over from the first bubble of the checkpoint. So in this example here, I was doing 5. I changed it to 4. I kind of like 4 for right now as like you have to pop 4 before the next checkpoint. So let me just update our little notepad here with the 4. Whoops. Yeah, that looks good. And then we'd have another checkpoint at 16, right? So 16 would be, I'll just add that in for, that's right? Yeah, why does that look? Why is that so spaced out? Did I not do it right? 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah, and 16 would be our next checkpoint, but I feel like the spaces between there are way too much. Anyway, that's not important. So in this case here, we're doing a checkpoint interval of 4. So we have to pop 4 bubbles before we get up to the next checkpoint. So, and initially, the way I have it working right now initially is whatever the checkpoint interval is, that's the amount of bubbles that will initially be shown on screen. So that would be the minimum amount of bubbles you will ever see. So in the last stream, I had that set to 5, and it just felt maybe slightly too much, so I just backed it down to 4. We'll keep that going. Wit JD. How's it going, man? You got my message? Thanks for hanging out. And thanks for the follow. I appreciate that. So, like I was saying, the last stream, we had this set to 5. So you'd have 5 bubbles on screen at a minimum. But then if you messed up, you'd have like a max of 9 bubbles on screen. Like in the worst case scenario, you'd have a maximum of 9 bubbles left. And that just felt a little overwhelming, at least right now with the color. So I backed that down to 4. And once again, this little text file notepad I have open here, doesn't have anything to do with the game code. This is just my visual aid for explaining things and for me understanding things, because actually this has helped me a lot, so I've kept it around. So I actually really don't know what I was trying to explain at first before I got to this point. But basically now we'll always have a minimum of 4 bubbles on screen. So every time we pop one, the next one will appear. And these other bubbles here are actually from the next checkpoint, technically. They just appear to kind of they appear in the level here just to kind of make it a little more challenging, right? There's more bubbles popping up as you go. So then once we hit, so in this case here, I made it up to a new checkpoint. And then I released the mouse, so I had to start over from that checkpoint. But we'd already popped a couple bubbles. So let's just say in this case, we made it to checkpoint 1. And then maybe I popped the bubbles 5 and 6. So in that case, when we start at checkpoint 1 here, we see bubbles 4, 5, 6, 7. And then as we pop 4 and pop 5, bubbles 8 and 9 appear. And then if we screw up, we have to go back to bubble 4. So the bubbles we popped reappear, but the bubbles that also reappeared from the next checkpoint do not go away. So then you end up with more bubbles. So that makes it a little more challenging, a little more punishing if you screw up. So so in the worst case scenario, I could pop 0, 1, as soon as I pop bubble 3, like on this first checkpoint here. So we pop bubble 0, pop bubble 1, pop bubble 2. That would make bubble 4, 5, and 6 appear. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Wait, bubble 4, 5, 6. Yeah, as soon as I pop bubble 3, then we move to the next checkpoint. So in the worst case, we'll have 0, 1, 2, or sorry, we'll pop, yeah, so let's do it here. So if we pop 0, 1, 2, the next bubble I pop, I'll go to the next checkpoint. And then if I release the cursor and have to start over, nothing changes because I'm already at the next checkpoint. If I screwed up at that point, I'm already on the checkpoint. So if we pop a couple here, and then, right, if I pop 3, then I'm at the next, oh, okay. Yeah, so if I pop bubbles 0, 1, and 2, which I just did, bubbles 4, 5, and 6 will appear. But then if I screw up, bubbles 2, 1, and 0 reappear because I have to repop them now, and I go back down to the beginning of my checkpoint. So I have to start over from 0. But now, bubbles 4, 5, and 6, those still remain on screen. So I have now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bubbles to pop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's just kind of a little punishing thing if you screw up like later before you make it to a checkpoint. So anyway, yeah, I don't originally remember what I was doing or why I was explaining all of that again, but I'm just refamiliarizing myself, I guess, with this. So, nice. Okay. But none of this has anything to do with what we really want to fix here. Because we want to fix at the end. So what I'm going to do, we want to fix at the end the issue where once we get down to our last like 3 bubbles, we start to get errors. So we want to properly update. We want to properly update our little progress meter navigation section here. And yeah, we might actually need to set up, I might actually want to set up an actual end game scenario or end game case now where you can complete the level and win. Aragorn Skywalker, good to see you in the chat. And thanks for the follow, by the way. I appreciate that. Oh, yeah, and shout out to Etwan, who also followed me. It's been a long time, Etwan. Hope you're doing well. So it's down here. So what I'm going to do is just change our marathon code to be, or our marathon config here. So I'm just going to set the bubble count to 8. So that means the whole entire marathon would only be 8 bubbles. We'd only have to pop 8 bubbles. Yeah, there we go. So 2 checkpoints, 8 bubbles. And actually, let's make it 7. Because that won't... Let's see how we're doing here. Okay. 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 All right. So actually, I'll change it back to 8 for right now. So I need to figure out the or what I need to do. So in our marathon object here, which the marathon object's the one that handles all of the game state, right? It's keeping track of which bubbles you've popped, which checkpoint you're on, which bubble you have to pop next. It's keeping track of all of that. So whenever you do pop a bubble, it is notified. It checks, hey, was this the right bubble that was popped? If not, you have to start over from the checkpoint, and it does all the handling of that. So we have, so basically all of this logic here happens in one of our event listeners, which is when the bubble was popped. So the bubble itself keeps track of the bubble objects. The individual bubble objects keep track of like when the mouse cursor drags in, you know, that's when it's keeping track of that. And then when you pop the bubble, it, you know, it has its own animation and everything for when the bubble's actually popped. So when when it's popped, the bubble itself fires the event, I should say. I use the word emit for the event. But it fires off the event bubble popped. And our marathon class is listening to that bubble. And then the bubble itself passes in the ID, its own ID, which those match up with this little example here, where the first bubble is 0, and then it's just an incremental integer all the way up till whatever the last bubble is. So when that bubble's popped, each bubble knows its ID, and then when it gets popped, when it determines that it has been popped, a key press and the mouse cursor is dragged over in the right spot, it fires off the popped event, passes its ID, the marathon grabs that, and basically the marathon just has, I've got a little top level if statement in here, where the first thing we check is if the ID of the bubble that was popped matches our target bubble ID. So our marathon object is keeping track of the next bubble we're supposed to pop, right? So, and it does that via, you know, from the beginning of the round, we just bubble 0 is the first one we need to pop. So in that case here, it's this green one. So bubble 0 was popped. The marathon had bubble 0 as that target. So when the bubble popped event fires, it checks, hey, was bubble 0, some bubble was just popped. Is it bubble 0? Because that's the target. If so, then that was right. So, so then a bunch of stuff happens, and kind of some complicated stuff that I might end up cleaning a little later. But it fires off, it tells the next bubble to appear. So it would tell bubble 5, in this case here, we pop bubble 0, we see bubble 0, 1, 2, 3. Oh, sorry, I said that wrong. We see bubble 0, 1, 2, 3 on the screen right off the bat. When you pop bubble 0, bubble 4 appears. So the next bubble appears. So at this point in the code, it fires up the next bubble. Or if it's run out of bubbles for at the end, then there's no more bubbles to have appear, then there's a little case for that. Then it increments our target bubble ID, so it goes just right to the next target bubble. It says that's going to be, you know, you just pop 0. That was our target bubble. 0 plus 1 is 1. So we go, that's our next target bubble, and it just increments every time. Now, if the player, basically that's our state. Oh, I'm not zoomed in here. Let's make that. Yeah, that should be a little nicer for people. Oh, that's too big for me. That should be good. So that's our one check here. If the ID of the bubble that was just popped is our target bubble, good. Otherwise, if not, then it fires off an event, cursor drag stop. So that's the event that fires anytime the player crashes into the wall, pops, in this case, pops the wrong bubble, or releases the mouse cursor. So that's also a scenario where if you can tell, I click and drag to start, and then I pop the bubble with the space bar. And then when I release, that also fires a cursor drag stopped event. So a cursor drag stopped event happens when I crash into the wall like this, or I just straight up release the mouse, or pop the wrong bubble, in the case, pop brown out of place here. Oh boy. Okay, that was an accident there. Okay. So in the case here, the event emitter fires. In the case we pop the wrong bubble, the marathon fires an event, cursor drag stopped. And the marathon class also listens to the cursor drag stopped event. So it fires its own event that it listens to. And then basically it will reset the target bubble ID back to the correct checkpoint bubble, right? So if you're on checkpoint 2 and you screw up, you're supposed to pop bubble 10 and you screw up, it will revert you properly back to bubble 8 for checkpoint 2, right? It won't send you somewhere back to a checkpoint that you've already passed, right? So the other thing that happens here in both cases is there's a little method that gets called set progress meter bubble colors. So that's our progress meter, or at least that's what I name it here. I might change the name of that because it doesn't really apply to this style of game mode anymore, like it did in our old round-based gameplay format. So we've got, this set meter bubble colors, which is actually a method of our marathon object. So it does some fancy stuff to just send, actually not fancy at all, but it sends to the progress meter, hey, here are the 3 bubble colors you need to show now, right? So, yes, so that's what I'm doing. Yes, I'm passing the color object of each of the next 3 target bubbles, right? So the next, in case we start round fresh, it's passing 0, 1, and 2 in. Now the problem, we're getting errors when we, right there, we got an error in the browser because it cannot read property color of undefined. So what's happening is we've got 8 bubbles. So our array is 0 indexed. So we've got 8 bubbles, but their IDs are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 8 total, but 7 would be the last ID because we start with 0. The first one is 0. So the problem is we are trying to, the problem is right here. So if our target bubble ID is now, we do a little loop. So inside of this set progress meter bubble colors, we do a little loop, which it just loops, in this case here, 3 times. So it's looping over this value I have in config, which is progress meter bubble count. So that's actually right here. I've got my config file right here. So marathon, progress meter, bubble count is 3. So that's just the number of bubbles to show along here. I could make it 4 or whatever, and it would show 4 then, which is nice to have that flexibility. I like 3 for right now for clarity, because from a gameplay perspective, when you're playing really fast and everything, just seeing 3 bubbles on the screen is a little easier to manage than looking at 5 or 6 or something like that. So we're keeping it with 3. So the problem is our target bubble. So for example, if our target bubble is, so this loop runs 3 times. So basically it's grabbing the target bubble color, and then whatever 2 target bubbles are after, or 2 bubbles come after that, right? Well, if you've popped bubble, in our case here, we're only playing, where we only have 8 bubbles. I set it to 8 bubbles, so these ones don't exist. So if you've popped bubble 5, well, there's only 2 bubbles left to pop before the game ends. There's just no more bubbles after that. So if you pop bubble 5, it's going to try to show bubble 8, which doesn't exist in our case of our game right now. So it tries to grab the color property of a bubble that doesn't exist in this array, right? So that's the long and short of our error, this error that we're seeing right here. Cannot read property color of undefined. Undefined is we tried to pull an item out of an array that isn't there. So we just get undefined. And then we're trying to get the color of that bubble, but we're trying to get the color of undefined because what we pulled out of the array is non-existent. It's undefined, right? So what we need to do is a little check here, because our progress meter is kind of dumb. It doesn't know anything about the game state. It just has this function called set target bubble colors, where it just says, hey, pass me the colors, give me the colors, and I'll show that, I'll update that, right? So the problem is with the marathon, because the marathon is the one that knows, okay, there's no more bubbles. The progress meter wants 3 bubbles, but there's only 2 bubbles left. So I can't pass, obviously, 3 bubbles ahead because that bubble just doesn't exist, right? The game's going to end. So I keep looking. I'm like supposed to be talking to the camera whenever I like look over, but I end up looking just at my like little thumbnail. I don't know. My little OBS window here where I can see myself. So I don't know. I'm trying to talk to the camera. This is what we're doing. This is that, blah, blah, blah. But I end up just looking down here. Whatever. All right, so we need to do a check. We need to do a little math, a little fancy math here, where we've got our bubble count configuration number, right, which is 3 in this case here. So we know we need to pull the next 3 bubbles. But we need to calculate quickly if we have 3 bubbles left to give. So we need to send the target bubble ID. That's always going to be the first one to send in our array. So we create a little colors array inside of this method. And that's where we just store the color objects from each bubble. And then we pass those to the progress meter. So it just loops from target bubble. That ends up becoming color 0 in this array. So we need to do a little math to see. I think we're going to start with a little variable bubbles remaining. Yeah, we'll just call it bubbles remaining. And that's going to be equal to, make sure I do this right here. Okay, so if we've got 8 bubbles, we're on target bubble 4. We are going to do, if we do the length of the array minus 4, that's going to be 4. Oh, no, that's correct. That's correct. That's what we want. Okay, so in the case of this here, where we've got just 8 bubbles, the length of our array is 8. So bubbles, just for example, bubbles.length is going to be equal to 8 in our scenario, right? So we take bubbles.length minus our target bubble, because target bubble, it needs to be drawn. So we take bubbles.length minus the target bubble, which would be 4. That would give us 4 back, and we do have indeed 4 bubbles left. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is all well and good. I'm going to get this out of here because we don't actually want that. So bubbles remaining is simply going to be equal to this dot bubbles dot length minus this dot target bubble ID. So this is the number of bubbles remaining. We've got that in a variable now. We might not actually need to put it in a variable. We might just calculate it inside of our for loop. But now, well, now we need to do the math against, okay, so the bubbles remaining. If bubbles remaining is less than the config number, right? So we only care, yeah, we're going to have like a little if. Or maybe we could do, yeah, actually, so we're going to, if bubbles remaining is less than config.marathon.progressmeter.bubble count, that will give us a new number to set. So let's say we'll do another variable called color count equal to this by default, and then we'll just do an if. So this color count will be the number of colors we need to send to the set target bubble colors, or sorry, send to our progress meter, which we do here. And what we'll do is we'll initially set color count to config.marathon.progressmeter.bubble count, which will be 3. It's a 3, right? Because it's always going to be sending 3 colors until that very last scenario where it's always going to be sending the next 3 colors until the scenario where finally, as you're popping bubbles, until finally we pop 4, and then once we pop 5, then now we need to do 2 bubbles only, and then once you pop 6, only 7 only, and then once you pop 7, you win. Once again, my little diagram, diagram, I'll call it that, keeps going up, but in our case here, we're just going with 8 bubbles only, so 0 through 7 bubbles. So basically, we just do this little check. Oh, you know what? That's gonna get called. Well, no, actually, that's fine. That's fine. We need this to get calculated every time. Every time we call this method, we need to calculate the color count, the amount of colors that we need to send to our progress meter. So initially it'll just always get set to the bubble count, which will, is 3 in this case, because 90% of the time or whatever, it'll probably just be that all of the time. 90% of the time, it'll be that 100% of the time. Bubbles. Okay, so then if bubbles remaining is less than that, our count, then we will do color count. We'll reassign color count to bubbles. Oh, it'll just be bubbles remaining. Duh. Okay. Sorry, sometimes it's hard to think clearly while streaming here. Plus, I have to go to the bathroom, so I am going to take a quick bathroom break. Let's do our big zoom. Be right back. Bump this font up a little bit here, huh? There we go. All right. Use the bathroom. I'll be back in a second here. And I'm going to refill on coffee quick, so my be right back still continues. Okay, I'm back. We're all out of coffee. Just kind of disappointing, but anyway. Now, I got to remember what we were doing here. So, we have our new color count variable, right? Which always 90% of the time or whatever, depending on how many bubbles we have, that will always be equal to our bubble count, just our raw bubble count variable in our configuration, right? So that's set to 3, our progress meter thing, right? So we want to show 3 bubbles on the side. You know, maybe I'll change it to 4 at some point, who knows? But for right now, it's 3. So whenever a bubble gets popped, the marathon game object needs to send the colors of the next bubbles to the progress meter object. Just remember, the progress meter is dumb. It doesn't know anything about the game, doesn't know anything about the game state or whatever. It just does what it's told. So whenever you send it some colors, you call the method to send it some colors, it'll just show those colors, right? Which is great when it works, right? But in the case here, we get a bunch of errors because we're at the end. But otherwise, when it works, right? And it gets all the nice new colors. Oh, those ugly greens. That'll be something else for a nice chill stream, just fixing the random colors that get generated, because right now they are literally 100% random, well, pseudo-random. But more often than not, whenever you just generate pure random colors, you get a lot of colors that are really similar. So this is like really hard to play. Whoops. See, I don't even know. I'm supposed to pop that there. Yeah, it's like, is it this one or this one? Nope, not that one. This one? There we go. Yeah. Okay, so we have our bubble count, or our color count now. The number of colors that we want to send to the progress meter. So instead of looping, we loop to get all those colors. Instead of looping over this number 3, we loop over a nice new color count variable, which gets adjusted based upon how many bubbles are remaining, which is awesome. So now we do a refresh here. We fire up a new marathon. Actually, I'm not sure what's going to happen when, you know what, it might just work. Oh, okay, so no more errors, but now this just keeps showing the same colors. There's nothing saying, oh, hide this one now or hide this one. So this is always showing, you know, the bubbles in order, right? So we got to pop this one first, then this one, then one of these magenta ones that, gotta love the RNG here. This, a third magenta one now. This, it looks like that. Is it this color? I was right. Another, like, purplish. What is this? All right, so now we're one. Okay, this one. Okay, so now we've got our last 3 bubbles of the marathon, right, of our game. But as we pop blue, once we pop blue, pink will slide up to this number 1 position here, off to the right of my cursor. Right or left? Right, off to the right of my cursor. Then purple, the purple little indicator down below the blue there, will slide up to be the big one, right? And then green would slide up into 2nd position there. And then there shouldn't be a 3rd bubble. But the problem is there's nothing in the progress meter saying, oh, don't draw a bubble there, or don't draw a little circle there. So then if I hit the right one. All right, so what ends up happening is the progress meter just ends up setting colors. Because the way the progress meter actually works is, this is just 3 other circle objects, right? A bubble uses a circle drawable entity object. And it, the bubble uses that, but the bubble's kind of fancy. But then the progress meter just has 3 of them, you know, or whatever that number is that we specify in our configuration, right? So we set 3. So the progress meter just draws 3 circles and then just sets the colors of them according to what happens. So we're not getting any errors now because we're not referencing bubbles that don't exist. But the problem is this thing, the progress meter doesn't get rid of, or doesn't unhide, doesn't hide the bubbles that go away, or the bubbles that we don't have. So this should actually be a really simple fix. So we go to our marathon progress meter object, and then this is the method that's getting called from the marathon, and it's set target bubble colors, and then this is the array of colors, array of color objects. And as those come in, we loop over each one of them, right? And then the target bubbles array. So this is the target bubbles. I call it target bubbles. They're not actually bubbles, bubble objects, bubble game objects. but they are just circle objects, right? So what happens is for as many colors as we get in from this method, we loop over each target bubble. We loop over each target bubble for as many colors as we get, right? So as soon as, in our case here, we get down below 3, we get to 2 bubbles left, the marathon is only passing 2 colors, an array of just 2 colors, to the progress meter, progress bar meter, whatever, progress meter. That's what I'm calling it. So, excuse me. So we pass in two colors, and then this loops over just these first 2 bubbles then, and it leaves this one to whatever the color was before. It only gets to these 2 because it's saying, well, I only got 2 colors, so I'm just going to update the first 2 colors in my list of bubbles here, target bubbles. So it just updates the colors, these 2 colors, and then this one still stays whatever it was before. So what I need to do, what I should do is just, the quick and dirty thing to do right now is just going to be, I'm just going to set, and this is going to change too at some point in the near future because, and I honestly didn't even want to fix this stuff right now because, well, I needed to. But the thing is, I'd like to add some nice like animation to this. I explained this a little bit in the last stream. Like I really want this, you know, the bubbles to kind of slide nicely from one thing to another. Because what happens right now is like we pop purple, that's our first bubble. Then green is just going to magically appear to be this biggest one. The blue is going to be this one. And then whatever, then this ugly puce color is going to be here, right? So as I do that, purple goes away, and then we get the next bubbles we need to pop, right? But I want there to be like a sliding animation. Like I want purple to slide off into nothingness. I want green to like slide and get bigger, right, as it slides into this spot. Same thing with blue, slides into this slot. And then puce color here would slide in from out of nothingness into this little position here, right? That's kind of what I want. So some of the stuff I'm doing right now is going to go away because I'm just going to build this nice little animated version of this, and all of this stuff's going to change, and the logic for how these positions are going to be is going to change. One of the things I kind of want to do is have this like kind of curve around this, our play area bubble here, our play area circle, sorry. This one would be kind of just, these would be kind of positioned along like the curve of this here. Right now I just have them going in a straight line because that was the easy math thing to do for the time being. So some of the stuff I'm doing right now is just going to get wiped away anyway, but whatever, I don't care for now. This is just I'm not thinking too hard on a Saturday here. I'm having a late lunch in like 2 hours, so so I'm not getting too down and dirty with everything today, if you know what I mean. So we have our set target bubble, and I'm explaining things a lot more because I'm just kind of filling my, I'm just hooking my brain back into what I've been doing because I haven't thought, or I haven't worked on this since Tuesday, and it's Saturday now. So just kind of refreshing myself, refamiliarizing myself with everything. So I'm explaining things maybe a little more detail than I would like to, because otherwise it would take me, I mean, we've already been going 50 minutes, and I probably could have fixed this in like 10 minutes, if I wasn't explaining a bunch of stuff as I'm streaming, right? So we've got our set target bubble colors method on our progress meter, right? The amount of colors that comes in, or our colors comes in as an array. And for each color that we get, we set all of our target bubbles to that. So what we need to do is actually kind of thinking of maybe using a while loop here. Maybe doing, let's say we do while. So like, let's say we do target bubble ID equals 0. So that's going to come in at 0. And then while target bubble ID is less than this dot target bubbles dot length. So now I'm just setting up a loop here for every target bubble that we have. So that would be these three guys, right? That's a target bubble. This is target bubble 0, target bubble 1, target bubble 2. So we're just setting up a loop for that. Now, what I'm also going to do, so I'm going to replace this loop I have here. But what we want to do is hide. So we're going to also be referencing our colors array that comes in. So if we get 2 colors, but we have 3, so we get 2 colors because there's only 2 bubbles left. But we have 3 target bubbles, right? We need to make this third bubble hide or disappear, right? So you only see these 2. So what we'll do is this loop will kind of have, well, I guess we'll just do an if. If colors target bubble ID, then yes, actually, we're going to need to do that. So we're looping for each target bubble. And then we're checking if that matches like 1-to-1 with the colors coming in, right? So if we've got 3 target bubbles but only 2 colors, our first loop will work. In this case, we'll have target bubble ID 0. We'll start with 0. Color 0 will exist. So then we'll set that color inside of this if case here, inside of our if. And then, like I said, we're passing 2 colors in this scenario. So then we would hit our while loop. Oh, sorry. I haven't done a while loop in a while. Need to always remember to increment. Otherwise, we would have fired off a nice infinite loop. Okay, so we increment. Oh, I guess I didn't. No, I don't need to do a while. I don't need to do a while loop. I don't know why I was thinking I needed to. In my head, I initially did this. All right. No. We're not doing that. Okay. So we are doing. Oh, I do need to change. Yes, this part needs to change. All right, so I'm getting rid of this while loop. Or I'll have if colors. I need that condition I. Okay. So in this case here. Okay. All right, so get rid of this while loop. Blah, blah, blah. Don't need that. Don't need that. Okay. So we're looping for each target bubble. We're looping for each target bubble. And then we're just checking if there's a color that's supposed to be matched, assigned to it. So if there is, then set that color, right? But if not, ooh, actually, this is nice. This is going to work perfectly. Okay. If not, then we are going to just make the target bubble, we're going to set its transparency to 100%. So, in other words, these ones have the color values for all these bubbles and everything we see right now are 100% opaque, right? But if we we dial the transparency all the way down to 0, then it's basically, it's still being drawn here to the screen, but it's invisible. And that's kind of a not so nice way to do it right now, but but for right now, it's fine. So we're just going to set the color of that to, and then I've set this up. Whoops. I've set this up. If I could hit the right key, we'd actually get something done. Okay. So if there's a color that came in from the marathon object that's supposed to match our target bubble, then we use that color. We copy that color. And we're setting our alpha to 1. If there isn't, then we're just going to use whatever color we already had, but set the alpha to 0. And then this should, the nice thing is this will auto correct itself now when, if we go back too, like the bubbles will be unhidden. So this should all work fine and dandy, if you like my overconfidence. All right, so now we're down to our oh, wait, okay. Now we're, what? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, 5. All right, we're down to our last 3 bubbles now because we only did 8. So now what we'll observe here is I'll pop purple, and then blue will slide up into the big position, cyan, blue, whatever. Orange will slide up into second position, and then that third bubble will just be gone. Ready for this? I probably didn't screw anything up, but it's very possible I did too. Aha, it works. Okay, there we go. So that's exactly what we want. We've got 2 bubbles left, and we only see 2 bubbles there. We don't have any errors in the console. Boom. 1 bubble left. Orange, orange. Boom. And we win. And we got a blank slate here. That's awesome. Except not really that awesome. Kind of depressing because I'm probably going to change a bunch of that stuff. But there'll be something kind of similar that has to stay there. So now I'm trying to think if I want to do well, let's just do some dumb stuff here. I just want to clean up all of this. I've got a lot of stuff printing to the console that I don't need anymore because I kept that around because I was debugging some stuff on the last stream. And if you were around for the last stream, which you can check out on YouTube, by the way, YouTube link is somewhere in Twitch. I upload all my streams to YouTube, even though they're really long and nobody's going to want to watch them. You know, people might tune in for 5 minutes during the Twitch stream, which is great. Thank you. But I'm uploading them all to YouTube either way, whatever. So, so what I was explaining just before I derailed myself there is last stream I was debugging a bunch of stuff that ended up just being something silly to do with the color. Oh, wait, one thing I didn't test. One thing I didn't test yet. We want to make sure that this goes back. So now if I crash, okay, so now, oh, there we go. Now we've got 2 colors left, but if I release the mouse, we have to start over from the beginning of the checkpoint, and these bubbles should go back. There we go. Beautiful. So that works too. And like here, we're about to pop the last bubble, but I crash into the wall. Resets us back to the checkpoint. And the first bubble of that checkpoint, and these bubbles reappear and everything. So that's great. So what I was saying before was I was having to debug a nasty issue with the color that, you know, I of course dug my own grave on that one earlier on, but we had an issue with our color class here. Anyway, I fixed that, but I would spend a bunch of time debugging because I thought it was all these other things that were causing issues, some problem with the gameplay logic or whatever, but it was just a problem with my color class. Because the bug only reared its head in like certain cases. It only reared its head when the random color that was generated, because we got an RGB, red, green, blue colors that make up one single color. It only happened when one of those was set to 0. So if one of those was set to 0, then this, and that's, and these are randomly generated colors. So it can be anywhere between 0 and 255. So we generate, in the rare case where it would generate a 0 randomly, or get rounded down to 0, then this bug would appear. And if you're playing really fast, you might not have even really noticed it. So anyway, that bug's fixed. And we don't need to worry about that anymore. But now I can just go back and clean up, because I was printing a bunch of stuff to the browser console. Like if you look here, it's just a mess. We don't need any of that. I say that. I'm probably going to delete all these consoles, and then end up wanting to keep them. You know what? Yeah, actually, I'm just going to comment them out for right now. No, screw it. I'm deleting them. Deleting them. I don't need them. This game mode is simple enough that I don't need to actually worry. I'm fairly overconfident in myself that the game mode logic itself, the marathon game mode code is working as it should be. So I'm just getting rid of all of these console logs. Okay. And we're doing that again there. We don't need that. Actually, we might want that. No, we won't want that. Our game code is our gameplay state code and everything is pretty done. I don't think, just tweaking some of the configuration, like how many bubbles there are, how many whatever. I set it to 8 before, but I was thinking 50. I'll do 20 so I can play it right now. So now this whole, whoops. I'm in the zone. I'm in the zone, baby. All right, where are we going here? Nice. Look at that. That feels really good. No consoles, log things popping up on the side. No errors. Looks good. I have this little "you're connected" message. But that's for other things, and I'm not worrying about that right now. So this is working pretty well. Oh, one problem I'll just mention here that I'm not going to address today. It's probably going to be the thing I do on Monday's stream, is if you notice, because it's going to be a little more of a architectural change as far as my engine code goes and everything. So the problem is when the nice thing is when the bubbles fade in, right? We did that animation at some point, either last stream or the stream before. I don't remember. Right? These bubbles kind of fade in nicely. They zoom in to the screen, right? That's cool. It looks good. Before I added that, they just popped in instantly, and that's kind of jarring and just not very, from a gameplay standpoint, it's kind of confusing. But when you just have things go from one state to another, kind of sliding over animation, having something animated over time, it's much easier for your eye to kind of keep track of what's going on. But the thing that I don't like right now, and it's more of an architectural issue rather than a just animation issue or something, or not having an animation, is if I undo, so if I crash and have to start over from the beginning checkpoint, this bubble that I popped here will just instantly snap back. And unfortunately, that's not just an animation thing. Well, I could potentially kind of patch an animation in over the top of the more underlying issue. But it has to do a little more with how I initialize things and destruct things, the game objects. So right now, what I'm doing I'm breaking a rule for my own engine that I don't really, well, it's kind of a unwritten rule, I guess, but I don't want to have that. I want to have a way to get around it where I can never initialize something twice. And when I say the word initialize, I'm not really talking necessarily like memory initialization like you might have in a language like C or whatever, or where you're like setting up actual memory for something. It's just kind of a more generic init method is what I call it, init. It's part of my entity class, which any object in the game pretty much is an entity. And, obviously there's many different types of entities, but we end up with kind of that top level entity object. And basically the thing that makes an entity important in this engine is its ability to listen to events. So it can respond, so you can then, the way you customize an entity to do something like a bubble, for example, is basically what events it listens to and then the code that runs when those events happen, right? So what I'm doing is I'm kind of double initializing something. And what happens when you call the entity.init function is, I'll pull up the code here. We'll look at it. We'll look at it together. Okay. So the entity class itself is very simple. One class, it's got this state object that I actually don't even use, a state property, which I don't even use. One thing might use it, so I might actually get rid of it at some point, but I don't care enough to clean it up. And it's got it's got an event listeners array. That's the only property that's there. And basically, the init method when you call this entity.init, it sets up its event listeners with the global event emitter object that I import up here. So it just sets up all these event listeners, and then it has a destruct method which does the opposite. It removes all those event listeners. So that way, as we're playing, maybe we have a marathon mode where there's 1,000 bubbles to pop, right? What happens is once you've passed gotten to a checkpoint, all the other bubbles can get destructed, right? I don't want all their event listeners hanging out for every time a bubble, for example, checks every time the mouse moves, and it checks for if the mouse cursor while dragging comes in, and then right now it just has that little black line that appears, right? So all of these bubbles that are here are checking the position of the mouse, of the cursor, and then seeing, if it's inside of me, then, it's running not only that, it's doing the check. It's checking the distance it's checking if the cursor is inside of itself or not, the bubble, right? So what happened there? Oh, okay. That's another thing I need to fix, but I'm not worrying about that right now. So we did have one little browser error there just now, but ignore it. We'll just sweep it under the rug for now. Everything's okay. So like I was saying, all of the bubbles, basically the bubbles listen for the mouse cursor move event, right? And then they check if the cursor's inside of them or not, right? So that would happen for all the bubbles. So if I didn't destruct the bubbles that we no longer needed anymore, if I didn't get rid of those, then, if we did a 1,000 bubble marathon, it's possible. It would be kind of, it'd be long, but it's possible that we could do something like that. We could have 1,000 bubbles you have to pop to win or whatever. If we had that, then we definitely don't want 1,000 bubbles, even once they get popped, listening to that mouse cursor move event. I mean, that would just slow our game down to our frame rate would tank, our CPU would go through the roof and whatever. So we don't want that at all. So once you get to a certain checkpoint and those bubbles in the past are no longer ever going to be shown on screen or have anything to do with listening or caring about the mouse cursor, then I can destruct those, right? But I'm kind of abusing my own system a bit in that I'm calling, and this was actually a bug I had at first, where I was calling init twice, because what I would do is I would destruct, once you pop the bubble, I would call destruct on the bubble. Or no, sorry. I would, now I don't even remember exactly what happened, but I would, what ended up happening is I was calling init on this entity twice, which I never want that to be a rule, or at least you should be able, if you are ever going to call init on a single entity twice, it should be init, destruct, and then init again before you can call init again. Like, it needs to be init, destructed, init. And even that I think I'm going to start getting away from. I think what I'm going to do is just have a method, another method of entity, where you can pull all the event listeners out. Because I might want an object, I might want to keep an object around, but I just want to pull all its event listeners out, because I don't want, I might want to keep a bubble, and this is JavaScript, and there's not really any sort of actual way to destroy or free memory or whatever. So I'm not, like, when I call destruct method, it's just removing the event listeners. And it's kind of generic. Like, I left it kind of generic because I thought at some point in time I might add some things to an entity where you might initialize some other things, or you might destruct some other things. And this actually ends up being really nice, because a lot of entities will have properties that are other entities, and they will initialize those through their own init. So they'll override the init, the base class init method. They'll call it by necessity, but they will then init, use that as a case to init their other properties, their other entity properties of that entity that are other properties, right? Kind of a parent-child hierarchy of entities. So, and then likewise with the destruct method, they do the same thing. So when you destroy, like, for example, a bubble actually does have two different entities. Actually, it's got a couple entity properties. But for this example, one of the entities is the pink, this pink circle here, and then one of the other entities that it has is the black, another circle object that's the black outline, and circles are entities. So the one bubble entity has a couple properties that are also entities as well, if that doesn't sound too confusing. So when you call init on a bubble, it also initializes those other entities, the circle itself, the other circle. And then when you call destruct on a bubble, it destructs the circle entities as well that are part of it. So what I'm saying is I'm going to have to overhaul, well, I was saying before it was kind of maybe an architectural thing that I might need to change, but it might not actually be that bad. It might just be that I start doing something a little different within the bubble. Because actually, I think the entity is going to stay the way it is for right now. I don't think I'll end up actually changing anything in that. Excuse me. Okay, so hang on a sec here. Okay. So basically what I was saying is, the whole thing I was explaining here is the problem with if I release the mouse now, this green bubble is supposed to come back, but it just snaps rather than kind of the smooth animation back. So we'll figure that out probably on Monday. The other thing I kind of wanted to take a look at today, and I might only stream for like maybe another 20 minutes or so. So we'll see. Maybe a little more, 30 minutes maybe. How long have we been going here? An hour 15? Not bad. So the other thing I wanted to try to accomplish today was getting an indicator or another little like indicator along our progress meter here to say what bubble is going to be a new checkpoint. So yes, actually that's going to be really easy. Pretty easy to do, at least in this current format of this. So I don't know what I'm thinking. It'd be nice to just say like, okay, when you pop, well, in this level here, since we have to pop, that when I pop this one, I went to the new checkpoint, right? But there's no indication of that to the player. But it would be nice to be able to say, okay, you're going to a new checkpoint now. And then just kind of show that off to the side there. And another thing I'm going to have at some point is also like another little progress meter that'll show your progress through the entire level, right? Or through the entire game. So, you've got 50 bubbles to pop, and it'll kind of show like, just a little bar that's showing your percentage basically of 0 bubbles popped all the way to 100% bubbles popped, right? And on that, I'd like to also show kind of like the checkpoint ticks so you could kind of see like, oh, I went to a new checkpoint. Oh, I went to a new checkpoint. So maybe once we add that, we might not even want like a little indicator here showing what bubble's a checkpoint. But for right now, I think we'll do that. So first thing is we will set up our progress meter needs to have a new circle object, and we're just going to have one. It's just going to have one thing. So this will be this.checkpoint indicator. And I believe we could just we might actually just be able to set it up right in here rather than in our marathon creator. So we've got our marathon creator static method here that just does all the calculations and blah, blah, blah to set up a new marathon, to set up, to generate the random positions for the bubbles, generate the random colors for the bubbles, generate, the position of everything, where everything's supposed to be on screen. Because right now we don't have any dynamic resizing set up. I would like to add that at some point. But if you keep growing the screen or whatever, your bubble, this stuff resizes. So once you refresh the browser, stuff resizes and whatever. But yeah, it's actually quite different playing at a big size, so that'll be interesting to see how that ends up playing out. Oops, this one. Okay. Anyway, shrink that down again. That's too small. Too small. Yeah, so the play area and stuff scales off of the height of the window more, because it's typical that your browser window on a computer, at least, would be on a desktop computer, would be or laptop, I guess. Typically, you're going to be wider, than you would be taller. So then the position of everything, the size of all these elements gets kind of scaled off of whatever the height is. And there might be at some point I add some logic to change that, you know, if you shrink the width or whatever. But as of right now, nothing responds to, you know, or I might do if the width is smaller than the height or whatever. Do something kind of more responsive. But for right now, we're fine. So we're talking about having our little indicator that'll show when we're coming up for a new checkpoint. So if I technically, if I pop this bubble, we're going to go to a new checkpoint. So I'd like to have, but there's no way to indicate to the player that. I just know that, you know, I know that because I built the game, I guess. So actually, I think, yeah, now we're on a new checkpoint. All right. So it'd be nice to have just a little indicator to say, hey, this bubble you're about to pop is going to be, you're going to be on a new checkpoint once you do that. That would be swell. So then we're going to need, so what I was saying before is I think I can just scale. So we've got our marathon creator method that does all the random generation of the colors and the positions of the bubbles and everything. It sets up the sizes, the pixel scale sizes and of everything. So that's obviously, it's not even that much. We've just got 137 lines here basically to set all of that up. Not too bad. And a bunch of those are importing things. And some things that we don't even use anymore. But we won't worry about that for now. So I can probably set up everything in, yeah, I can set everything up in our progress meter class. So our progress meter class keeps track of these 3 bubbles, right? Right now, all it is an entity that has an array of target bubbles, which are circles, and then it just keeps track of them here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new circle property that's just going to be called checkpoint indicator, right? We just need 1 for now. There might be a point in time where we needed 2, but for right now, you're only showing 3 bubbles, and our checkpoints are 4 bubbles apart, so we're never going to have 2 on screen at once. So I'm just going to do 1 for right now. So what we'll do is we're going to need to import some stuff here. So we're going to import circle from circle.js. Okay, so our checkpoint indicator is going to be a new circle. And a circle is what I have as referred to as a drawable entity. So it has a few fancy parameters. Oops. Like a color, a size, a position, a z-index, what height it should draw above or below other entities on screen. So it's got a color, a size, and a position. So we need to set all of those out of the box. Or if we don't set a color, it'll initialize to black. If we do need to set a size and a position, otherwise things will break. Yes, okay. So the initial size, we might as well just set the initial position to the last target bubble's position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the circle, it's just going to be an outline, a little outline circle. And its position will move. Okay. Sorry, I got to think a little bit about this and not talk so much. All right, so we're going to need a size, which should just be I am going to actually put another little variable in here. Marathon. Oh. This will be checkpoint indicator scale. And we'll say 1.1. So what, for right now, just as an initial thing. So what I'll do is I'm just going to set, because the indicator right now I'm thinking is just going to be a circle around the target bubble. That's the next checkpoint. So what I'm thinking is that it will just be 10% the radius of that circle, because it'll be smaller if you go down to like this circle or this circle. And I'm just going to say it's going to be 10% for right now. I'm just plugging that in kind of arbitrarily here. So we'll have 10%. It'll be 10% bigger than whatever circle it's on. So the size, we're going to, well, let's set position first, actually. Pose. Positions are always a 2D vector, X and Y, because we're doing just 2D stuff here. So we just have an X and Y position of something, right? So let me set this up now before. Okay. So our position is simply going to be the position of our last bubble, actually, because that's where the first time it's going to be shown. So we're going to do this. So position is just going to be this dot target bubbles, and then we're going to get the last bubble in the target bubble, the position of the last target bubble. So and then, so that's kind of ugly to do, but whatever. And then this will be, I'll put these on new lines just because this file is not very big. Doesn't have a ton of lines, so this is fine. And this will be dot pose dot x. Okay. So we're just setting our initial position of this indicator to be at the same position of our last target bubble, right? So initially this position will just be right here, right? It'll be the same position. It's going to have a different radius. So a circle has a position, an X and Y position of its center, and a radius, which is, you know, a single dimension radius to express how big our circle is on our screen in pixels. So our radius is going to be initialized as the same bubble. You know what? Yeah, I don't like doing these calculations over and over again, but it's not that bad. It's not that big of a deal. So then this radius is also going to be the radius of our last bubble, but then times our 1.1, because we want it to be the same size as, or we want it to be 10% bigger than this bubble to start, right? I don't know if 10% is going to be a good number or not. That's the number that came off the top of my head. We'll see it once we actually get it working. We'll see if that's what we want. But for right now, we want the radius of our indicator to be 10% bigger than whatever bubble it's on, right? And we're initializing it to be at this bubble position. So So we're going to simply take the size of that last target bubble and multiply it by our checkpoint indicator scale, which is in our configuration file. So config.marathon.progress meter. Checkpoint indicator scale. Beautiful. So scaling the radius up of our indicator, 10% of whatever the target bubble is. The radius of the target bubble. And then color, whatever. It'll just be black for right now. That's fine. It'll initialize to black. So that's all well and good. We do need to initialize this this circle, because we're setting our property here, checkpoint indicator, as a new circle. So it's setting a new instance of the circle. But in order to actually start drawing this circle, we need to actually initialize this entity. That's what sets up our event listeners, and then gets us sets up our event listeners so that things can draw. Because if part of something knowing to draw on the screen or not is actually listening to an event that tells it when to draw. Actually, that's not necessarily true anymore. That's kind of changed. At one point in time, that was true, but just pretend it's true for now. All right, so we need to initialize our checkpoint indicator. We don't need to initialize our target bubbles, because those actually get initialized in our marathon creator. So when that stuff gets set up in there, I know that's kind of confusing. Whatever, I might end up actually moving this initialization up to that marathon creator at some point, just to kind of have all the objects and everything that get sized and scaled and created for something. Those could get set initially in the marathon creator object, or the marathon creator function, factory function, whatever, static method, whatever. I'm not playing games with names right now. So we need to initialize, basically. I keep going on these little tangents. That's so I can avoid actually doing real stuff right now. So our checkpoint indicator, we need to call init on that, right? So that will initialize our checkpoint indicator. So in theory, and I'll set the destruct right now. So when our progress meter will get destructed, we also want to call destruct. Oh, that's a problem. Glad I caught that. This would cause problems down. So at some point in time, if you maybe noticed, I have in the destruct method of our progress meter, I have, which actually never gets called currently in the code right now in the game. There's no way to actually quit the marathon once you start it. I have to get to that at some point too. But if you, right now, before with some testing code, I was calling destruct on just a single target bubble. I had just a target bubble at one time, but now we have an array of target bubbles. So this property target bubble doesn't exist. So at some point when I added that, this bug would have reared its head at some point. So we need to do this .target bubbles .for each target bubble, and then we're going to destruct each target bubble. So that is done. And I gotta use the bathroom again. Sorry, I like to stay hydrated, you know. Dude, it's time for some coffee, yo. Aragorn Skywalker. Yeah, except I already drank so much, and now I need to release some. So we'll be right back in a minute here. All right, I'm back. And yes, I did wash my hands after using the restroom. My bathroom's like 15 feet away. It's okay. All right, so I set up this destruct stuff, missed a semicolon there. There we go. So we're all good there. Now, actually, we can run. We should have an indicator now. That doesn't do anything, but it will. Oh. Oh, another thing I need to do. All right, something's wrong. Because in theory, stuff should be drawing, or we should be drawing a little black. Actually, it would be it wouldn't be a ring yet. It would be a solid black circle. But we should be drawing a solid black circle. Let me just do. We didn't have any errors. Nope. Okay, let me just do a quick. Okay. I'm just going to set my own quick little radius here. Set a radius of 100. This would be 100 pixels. Oh. Yes. Hang on one second here. All right. Sorry about that. I'm back. Okay, so probably going to be wrapping things up here in a little bit. Okay, so now we got the black circle. So for some reason this was not calculating properly. So let me print. Oh, actually, that's not going to tell me anything useful. I have 1.1 in here. That should be. Just make it 2.0. 2. Get rid of this here. Come on, what? Something. Okay, so what we're gonna do is just print checkpoint indicator to the console. So for some reason, size is not a number. All right, so for some reason, our nice little logic here that's supposed to be setting our, oh, I know what it is. I didn't actually use the radius of this last circle because I wanted to say I want to scale this thing. I want to scale our little indicator 10% more than the radius of this little circle to start. And I wasn't actually using the radius property of this. I was, I was not calling the size and the radius. So, there we go. Okay. So that's 2x right now. I set it to 2 times. So let's just try our 1.1 again. So 10% bigger. We want it to be 10% bigger. That's kind of cute. Let's see, we got someone's at the door. Okay, hang on one second here. All right, I see what's going on. Somebody was at the door, and it was a guy dropping off coffee. Thanks, Aragorn Skywalker, for delivering coffee, for ordering coffee for me. I appreciate it. All right, I'm back.
Jared,
What?
is this for you?
Yeah, Robbie said in the chat, Aragorn Skywalker said in the chat, dude, it's time for some coffee.
Oh my god.
It came in,
That's hilarious.
that's funny. All right, thanks, Aragorn Skywalker. That was fast. I got it right here, although it's in a... All right, thank you. That's hilarious. I'm gonna try not to spill it. It's big. Pretty big. And it's from Chili's. Came in a Chili's cup. All right. Anyway, trying to remember what we were doing here. Oh, we scaled up our checkpoint indicator 20% now. So,
Let me try it.
oh, be careful. It's full. All right. All right, we spilled. We spilled. All right. Hang on a second here.
Are you okay?
All right. I'm back. Sorry, spilled a little bit of the coffee, but I think it's all good. All right. So, we're scaling up our checkpoint indicator 20% now. If I refresh, is that 20%? Did I say it? No, I didn't save the file. That's why. Okay. All right, so that looks a little better. The one thing I would like to do is actually just make this. Actually, let's go 30%. See how this looks. All right, that's a little better. And then I'm going to make it transparent so it's not like a full, or make it just an outline, little black outline rather than the full filled in circle. So we don't need this anymore. Oh, thank you. I gotta remember how I do. Do I do that in here? No. Should have something like that in here. Oh. That's something that needs to be fixed. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Yeah. All right, so we need to set the draw style of this circle. So we need to do, for one, we need to import our helper class here. This is all something that I'm not even sure. I have all this stuff stored in a helper class, but I don't know if we're really going to be utilizing it right now. So now, yes, okay. So now in our init, we'll also set up the, just do that first, I guess. We're setting the draw style of our, so the draw style has basically two things. It can either draw the full rectangle, or the full rectangle, full filled in circle, shaded circle like our bubbles are, or it could just be like an outline like our play area, for example. Just a border of a certain thickness, right? So I think the way we do this now, yeah, there we go. So now we just have like a little indicator here, or a little whatchamacallit there. Yeah, indicator, that's what we're calling it, right? Marathon checkpoint indicator, that's what we're calling it. All right, so now we need, so for right now, this doesn't do anything. It initializes, you know, in this position, and it's visible, and it shouldn't be visible to start, but it's not going to, oh, whoops, pink. It's not going to do anything as we play, right? Like it's just, it's stuck there. But we want it to only appear when one of these bubbles is the next bubble we have to pop to get to our checkpoint. So that means we're going to need to do some position. Well, okay. That means our marathon class is going to have to pass an additional parameter to say if one of those bubbles is a checkpoint bubble ID, I will call this. So if one of the bubbles that it's supposed to show here in our bubble indicators, our target bubbles, if one of those is a bubble that will get you to the next checkpoint, that needs to get passed in. So we're going to pass the ID of that in from our marathon object, our game object, or our game state object. So in this method here, we need to check what we'll do is we will we'll create a new variable here. Oh, what was it? Target bubble checkpoint. Yeah, bubble checkpoint ID. We're going to initialize it to null. Because if there aren't supposed to be, you know, right off the bat, we wouldn't have a checkpoint till we pop the fourth bubble. So we shouldn't see a bubble. We shouldn't see the checkpoint indicator here. Sip of the coffee here. So when we start, we shouldn't see the checkpoint, the indicator right away, because the checkpoint bubble would be, you know, this blue one, I guess. So then once blue appears here, then we should see the indicator, you know, and then as we pop whatever after that, blue would slide to here and the indicator would slide with it, right? So in other words, if there aren't, in that first initial scenario, none of these would have an indicator on it. So when the colors get passed from the marathon object, it would pass null for this checkpoint bubble ID parameter that's going to come in. That's going to be null. And then that way we can say, if this is null, then we can just hide the indicator and not do anything with it. But otherwise, if it's some number, then Yeah, we'll have to pass. This should be called checkpoint color ID or checkpoint color index. I'll use a full thing. Checkpoint color index. Because this thing doesn't know about the bubble indices. It's only going to have this color array, and it just needs to know which color in this array that comes in should be a checkpoint one. So which one is going to need the indicator set around it. So yes, we can keep that as null. Then trying to think of the best way to figure this out, because there's multiple ways we could tackle it. Let's see here. We could do actually we're gonna also move this down here. We're also gonna call this color checkpoint ID. There's no color checkpoint. There's no such thing. But in our case here, we're just saying one of these colors that we're passing from the marathon object should be a checkpoint color and therefore have a indicator put around it. The checkpoint indicator. So okay, so what I was doing was I think if we do target, okay, so let's do if this dot target bubble ID, or wait a minute. Oh, plus I will throw that into a const bubble ID equals this dot target bubble ID plus I. Yes. And then that way we can just do okay, so if bubble ID mod what am I looking for? Cur checkpoint ID. This dot cur checkpoint ID. So basically, dividing the bubble ID, I'm doing modulo. So I'm getting the remainder of the division between bubble ID divided by the current checkpoint ID, which if that's 0, we'll throw equal to 0 in there. So if that's equal to 0, then color checkpoint ID would equal I. That will be our color. Just do that in a one-liner here. And then, yes, so it's okay if that gets recalculated. Otherwise, it would be null. If that case never occurs, it would be null. And then we pass color checkpoint ID in here. So basically just comparing that target bubble, or that bubble that we're looking at, figuring out if it's the current checkpoint bubble, calculating that, and then we're passing that now to our progress meter. So that is all working swell. Should be working swell. Okay. Now we need to actually use it. So if we could just do a check. Trying to think of a way to do this without, just trying to minimize as many. Well, we'll just do it the quick way first. So checkpoint color, if it's null, oh, I need to actually check if it's null. If it's null, then actually, this is going to need to be a multi-line here. This dot target bubbles dot. Actually, no. It'll just be a single line here. So if this is null, then we need to just hide dot. Oh, sorry. This dot checkpoint indicator dot color dot set alpha 0. So this will just hide it for right now, setting the alpha to 0. And I really need to do like a slightly better way I need to do something else to handle this, where I'm not just, to hide something, I'm not just setting its transparency to 0. It's alpha to 0. I need to figure out. A better way to do that, but for now, this is fine. So this will hide that if it's null, and then we need to set it and the position if it's not null. So we're setting our target bubble colors, and then we could also I guess we'll just do a little check. If checkpoint color index equals I, then this is where we would set up oh, no, we don't need to do that. Let's see. Else. Okay. We can do this completely separate outside of the loop. We don't need to worry about that. So now this dot checkpoint So if we're not null, checkpoint indicator, we need to set color dot set alpha to 1. We just need to always do that in case it was, was previously hidden. And then we need to set the position to whatever the checkpoint color index is. The target bubble index and the checkpoint color index, those are synonymous pretty much. So then this dot yeah, we need to get the target. Sorry. We need to actually set our position and size. We need to calculate the size again, the radius, because we're going 10% bigger than whatever the thing is. All right, I need to quick finish this because I need to go actually. So let's quickly do this. Dot pose equals x and y. So we're going to, this is our position. So this is simply going to be this dot target bubbles checkpoint color index dot pose dot x, and then basically the same exact thing here, but with the y. And then also, okay, so that's good. And then we need to do this dot checkpoint indicator dot size dot r equals, so you're setting the radius to 10% or whatever, not 10%, but whatever we change it to, 30%. Yeah, 1.3. So checkpoint, our config, blah, 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 config.marathon.progress blah, 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 scale, which is our 1.3. So we scale it up to 1.3 times this dot target bubbles checkpoint color dot size dot r times our 30%. Okay. So in theory, that should have worked, but it didn't. Oh. Whoops. What? All right. Something's not working in there, but I need to go. Got lunch with the family. So, yeah, once again, this is kind of a quick stream. Just chill, laid back, didn't tackle anything too complicated. Yeah, I don't want to just leave this the way it is, but I kind of need to. But yes, then we'll be back probably on Monday. Might hop on tomorrow for a little bit stream, but otherwise Monday, the big stream. But otherwise, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for the coffee, Aragorn Skywalker. Appreciate it. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.